I first became aware of the punk scene when I was in Los Angeles. I went down there. I'd actually had a job for a couple of months, and I saved some money and went down to take an electronic music course in LA. And while I was down there, I was in a record shop, and this guy came in, and he had this kind of really shaved, sort of Hare Krishna kind of look, but he had this motorcycle jacket on. And I'm kind of looking at it. It was kind of scary at that point. This was 77. And I sort of thought, what is this? You know, is this, I couldn't figure out if the guy was a Hare Krishna guy or just it was a new style or whatever. But it stuck in my mind. And while I was down there, I kind of, did this kind of study. And then I moved back up to Seattle where I got more of it. While I was in Seattle, I saw that there was definitely stuff happening. People were really into kind of the Sex Pistols and the Clash and all that stuff. And I got more into it. I began to take that look on. I sort of, got a kind of a spiky haircut and basically, began to sort of dress like the London, punks. From my late teens to early 20s, I went through many changes of appearance. I seemed to be a bit of a chameleon, an artful dodger. Of course, fashion and rock music and psychedelic drugs played a big role in how I dressed and approached reality. Rebelliousness seems to run in the family, and I've always felt like a bit of an outsider. Singing to the beat of music soft and sweet, I met a dusty the style interested me. It was a whole new aesthetic and a whole kind of different thing, so I found it exciting. But as I kind of listened more and more to the music, from where I was coming from, it seemed to be fairly conservative. They were using these kind of chords, from, the beginning of rock and roll, like the kind of 50s and early 60s. And I thought, we can take this further. This is because I'd been listening to also like to Brian Eno, and I'd been listening to Cage and Stockhausen and Moondog and all these guys who and jazz guys like Miles Davis, and I thought, this is a platform. This is great. Like it's opened up this whole stage for us to kind of be creative and basically take it as far as we can. So I began to kind of work on that, and I got access to some electronic music studios in Seattle as well. There you didn't have to have credentials to get into the studio. Like here at Simon Fraser, I think that was one of the few other places. You had to have a degree, you had to have all these kind. But in the States, they actually had a few places where you could actually go and just pay money and learn this stuff. Some of my interest in sound and making experimental music came about from a certain painting technique that I was using. I was airbrushing using stencils and began to see that it could probably be used with tape recorders. Just as I was layering color through stencils on paper, I could be layering sound on tape recorders. So I began to experiment, at first in a very primitive way, using found objects as sound sources. Things like bicycle wheels, cheap tape recorders, and basically anything I could get my hands on. As time went on, I refined my techniques and got more sophisticated equipment. I also had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles and Seattle to study in real electronic music studios. When I came back to Vancouver in 1977, the punk thing had just started. I soon became involved in a punky electronic music group called E. In E, we would use diverse sound sources like electric blenders and toys. I would also drop things on my guitar, things like candy hearts, toy bombs, soldiers, rubber penises. Eventually, the band ended because of personality conflicts. I think the Skulls, it was the Skulls that were beginning, and there was a few other things going on. I auditioned, actually, not auditioned, but phoned for a job as a guitar player. And I guess Joey answered the phone, and he says, "Do you play chords?" I said, "Well, not really." And he said, "Okay, well, we need someone," and that was the end of that, right? And I think I had some kind of crazy name like Dickie Dildo or whatever it was. Everybody was trying to have like one of those names. So anyway, then I met, we were going to the gigs at the Japanese Hall around that time, and I think I saw the Avengers and some other bands, and was it Furies maybe, and met, I guess, the guys from the Generators. And I went to the art school to put an ad up for, like, I was interested in being in a band and stuff, and they were there. So we kind of, we looked at each other. It was like that sort of fashion thing, right? And, oh, you're cool. And so anyway, I met those guys, Randy and Gary and Michael, and we talked about stuff and where we were coming from, and they said they had this band. And I thought Randy's energy was interesting, right? He kind of like this Iggy Pop kind of, but really, yeah. So anyway, there was talk about the Generators and being in the Generators, but it never happened. It kind of fell apart. I think there was stuff going on, and then I ran into those guys again, and they said, well, we're forming a band. And I think I had rented one of these big Korg synthesizers. So I think because I had the look and the equipment, I was, one of the I could. I was eligible to be in the band. So anyway, we kind of went to Gary's place and we talked about, and we decided that, okay, it was going to be called E, and it was going to be about this electronic kind of stuff. And so that was how I started and got into it. And we did a number of gigs, and it was kind of, we got some attention, but it was all right. But I guess there was a certain kind of thing. At one point we did a gig with Henry Kaiser at I think it was the Pender Auditorium, and I did this guitar piece dropping these little bombs and marsh. It was kind of like a performance thing on the guitar. And Grant's sister took a picture for Snot Rag. I was unaware of it. It ended up on the front page. Gary, the other guy in the band, saw it, and he was, I guess, the founder, and got jealous. And the next thing he said, the band is no longer a band. I was out of it, and apparently I found out later he thought everybody should have been in the picture. Well, I had no idea that the picture was even taken. I was just doing my part of the band thing, right? And so that kind of fell apart, and then I basically formed Tunnel Canary. And then I got to do what I wanted to do, which was like a much kind of dirtier, raw, kind of, how could I describe it? I thought it was punkier sound, and there were no rules, basically. It was not about trying to kind of be a well, it was. I actually thought it was pop music, to tell you the truth, but pop music, with a kind of a bite.